Hi, kids. Today we're reading again Race Against Death. Today we're going to read two chapters. These are kind of short. Swept Away and A Watery Grave. So here we go. On a dock at the mouth of the Skeena River in British Columbia, a 10-year-old boy was riding his bike. The date was March 24th, 1974. That's a long time ago. 4 days into spring by the calendar, but still chilly in that western province of Canada. The boy was dressed for winter. The only sign of spring, it seemed, was the river itself. Swollen with the waters of melted snow from the mountains, it rushed headlong into Chatham Sound and emptied into the North Pacific. It was a small river, but cold and strong at that time of year. The boy, Todd Nilsson, watched it as he rode up and down the wooden dock. He had not ridden his bike in a few months, and he was still wobbly. Suddenly, the edge of the dock came very close, and before he could stop, the bike rolled off the dock and landed him splash into the river. Ah! By the time he had come up for air and shaken the water out of his eyes, the swift current had carried him yards from the dock. Standing nearby on the shore at that time was a teenage girl named Pamela Ann Stewart. She was 17, and like her Scottish ancestors, hardy and resourceful. She wasted no time. Running down to the end of the dock, she took off her shoes, shrugged off her coat, and dove into the water into the cold river. Pamela Ann had to swim about 50 feet to reach Todd, who by then had been carried into deep waters. She had the current to help her, though, and 2 free arms for swimming. It was only when she reached him and put one arm about him to tow him back to shore that the struggling began. By then, she was beginning to feel tired, and the cold water made her arms and legs feel like lead. Her clothes seemed determined to pull her down into the river, and as the current pushed against her, the small ladder at the side of the dock seemed farther and farther away. Slowly, she started to make way toward the shore. Would she ever get there, or would she and Todd both be swept out to sea and drowned? She couldn't make her legs kick much longer. She couldn't pull through the water any more with her free arm. But the ladder was only a few yards away now, just a few yards more. Exhausted, Pamela Ann finally grabbed the bottom rung of the ladder and clung to it, too tired to do anything else. But the people who had watched her from the dock reached down to help. They pulled from the water a dripping 10-year-old boy and a 17-year-old heroine. Heroine is feminine for hero, a girl hero, a heroine. All right. Wow, that was exciting. Here's A Watery Grave. The cab of a pickup truck came by a cozy place. Can be a cozy place driving down a snowy, dark, deserted highway. In the icy waters of a bay, it can turn into a deadly trap. Snow was falling gently on New Year's Eve. Can you do snow? Make snow for me. As the 12-year-old Trudy Taylor and her grandparents drove back to her home in Olympia, Washington. They had spent the day in Port Angeles, a town that faces Canada across the water in the far northwestern corner of the United States. Now they drove the long, winding road south. The foothills of the Olympia Mountains loomed in the darkness on the right, and the dark waters of the Hood Canal shone on their left. They were looking forward to the comforts of home. Suddenly, just north of the small town of Hoodsport, the road beneath the fresh snow became slick with ice. The pickup skidded off the edge of the road, rolled over the embankment, and plunged into the canal. And there, 15 feet from shore, with the tide beginning to flow out into Puget Sound, the truck started to sink. There it is. There's the picture of the truck. Wow, that'd be scary. Trudy's grandparents were actually her parents. They had adopted her when she was an infant, and so they were the only family she had. William Taylor, her grandfather, was 62 years old and retired. His health was not good. He had emphysema. It's a lung disease that made it hard for him to breathe, and he wore a pacemaker in his chest to keep his heart beating. To make matters worse, he had a broken rib and a sprained ankle when the truck slid off the road. William Taylor knew they would be trapped if the truck sank before they had time to get out. Quickly, as the pickup settled into the water, he rolled down his window. "Hurry, Grandmother," Trudy said. "Roll down your side, too. Crawl out onto the hood." Her grandmother did so, but when Trudy turned back to her grandfather, she found that he had moved. Immobilized by the pain of his broken rib, he couldn't budge. Drawing together all the strength in her small frame, Trudy leaned against her grandfather and pushed until she got him out the window. He swam slowly to shore. He swam because it was all he could do, but he knew that behind him his wife Frances faced a terrible fate. "Trudy could swim," he explained later. "I taught her when she was in kindergarten, but Frances couldn't. I knew I was in no condition to take her to shore, but I figured if I could find something for her to hang on to, she could make it." Meanwhile, Trudy had joined her grandmother on the hood, which was already underwater. Feeling the truck sink further into the frigid canal, Trudy shoved herself away from the hood and started treading water. "It's sinking," she told her grandmother, her teeth beginning to chatter. "You'll have to get off. Trust me, Grandmother. I'll get you to shore." The woman had no choice. With Trudy holding her, the two set off for the bank, swimming more and more slowly, sinking deeper and deeper as Frances Taylor's wool coat began absorbing water like a sponge. Behind them, the truck sank from sight. There was no going back. Just in time, Mr. Taylor picked up a wooden rack that had been knocked off the truck when it rolled over the embankment and held it out to his wife. She grabbed it with frozen fingers and pulled herself to safety. Trudy had not even reached the shore herself when she saw the headlights of a motorhome heading toward them along the empty highway. She scrambled onto the bank and, her nose still bleeding from when she had bumped it in the accident, climbed the embankment and waved to the driver. She did this. "Help, help." The driver saw the tracks running off the road, then Trudy, wet and bleeding. He stopped instantly. He and his wife got out, helped the Taylors into their van, and wrapped them in every blanket they had. "The last thing I saw as we drove away from the canal were 2 plastic bags bobbing away in the tide," Trudy said. "Our suitcases were inside with all my new Christmas clothes and my wristwatch." But inside the motorhome with her was a much more precious cargo. Her own grandparents, wet and chilled to the bone, but alive. Wow, that was 2 really good stories. And remember, these are stories that actually happened. These kids were heroic. They did some pretty daring things to save other people. That's wonderful. Okay, well, that's it for now. I'll see you on Monday. Until then, bye.